Okay, back to the Coleman generator. Wanted to do an update on it. So, what I found was the end of the shaft, and I'm going to try to insert a short clip from a previous video because I'm not going to tear all this back apart. Just to show you. But you'll see what I'm talking about, where the end of the shaft comes out. I've hooked up my dial indicator right to this front of this, took this off, then ran the bolts back in, tightened everything up so that this stayed stationary with this, stayed stationary with that. And then pulled the spark plug and proceeded to, sorry, you were just sitting there looking at a sign there. Pull this with that, and then took the spark plug out, pulled the engine over, and my dial indicator showed I had 30 thousandths play up and down on the end of the shaft. So that made me think that's why this thing will produce power on very low RPM, but it won't when it gets up to RPM that it actually needs to produce power correctly. And the power that it did produce at very low RPM was just enough to run a light. And that was about it. It's just little lint hairs and stuff. Except for right on the top of that, I'm trying to get it into the light. I wonder how it looked through here. Probably can't tell nothing. Either way, that brush is barely making contact. This brush is making a little more contact, but it's still not enough. So I got a piece of 500 grit sandpaper, and I don't have my tripod here, but I'm going to just very, very gently sand that. See that little line right there? And that wider line right there? That's where the brushes are running. And that is not making, I don't think it's making enough contact. I've checked out the windings here. I don't see anything burnt. So I don't think that's my problem. It was working and then it just quit. And the time before that, it had something to do with this here. But that's been a few years back and I can't remember. So I took my half-stroke air hammer and proceeded to work that shaft down. I marked it at the highest point, and then I would turn it over. I would take this to it. I tried to just knock the shaft down. I took the bolt out of the center of it, which you should have seen in the other video, which takes it loose from the center shaft. But from the shaft from the engine to this, it is pretty well just stuck. It doesn't want to move. Now I got this thing and had problems, and it actually took the bearing out back here and slid it in. Kind of hard to explain. This is a plastic housing, and it had enough vibration to where it just slid the bearing back here down the shaft, at which point it made contact with the brushes and it quit working. So I put a washer in there, act as a spacer, to stop it from moving back like that again, and it worked. And the guy took it back and he used it for quite a while. The face of these plug-ins were bubbled up. So they've been hot. So he's maxing out whatever is supposed to be on this thing. But that aside, I tried knocking it down using just a rubber mallet. That didn't work. Then I tried a hammer with a piece of wood. That didn't work. And that's where I decided this was going to have to do the trick. Because I got a generator that doesn't work. I don't have anything to lose. So I took that off, took that apart. I'd hammer it, turn the motor over with a dial indicator on it, check it. And this is my dial indicator that I used on the generator on the end of the shaft to see if it was moving. And when I got through with it, it was only moving. Let's see if I can duplicate it. There. It's only moving about that much. Where when I started, it was moving like that. This is the magnetic base that I attached to the housing to hold it in place to get the same reading every time. So that's those two pieces. We will return back to your regularly programmed station. Each time it got a little bit less and a little bit less. And I'm going to guess, so I put these wheels and those legs on the front there on this thing. Before it was just this flat mount base here. I'm going to guess this thing got dropped. Wasn't by me, but by the guy I got it from, because well, the way that shaft was hanging down, 30 thousandths out, that's quite a little bit, especially when you consider the brushes have to ride on the flat surface, not the round surface. Well, either way it would have ran. It would have had the brushes bouncing, and I'm pretty sure that's what's been happening. That's why this thing doesn't produce power when it hits high RPM, or it didn't. I have run this. I hooked up a couple of shop vacs. That's one of them. Got the other one over there. I hooked them up and it ran them just fine. But what I want to do is put about a gallon of fuel in it and then run it until it runs that out. I did fix a carburetor problem that it had from running out of fuel the last time. But I figure if it'll run that shop vac and that shop vac and that squirrel cage fan right there, because it draws a nice little load. If it'll run those and keep them going for an hour or so, because this thing's never run over 5 minutes before quitting, then I'm going to call it good. I might even hook a leaf blower to it and just see, because that each side of that top one, the white one, that's 110 and that's 110, but it's one side of 220 and the other side of 220. If that makes sense, it's not actually 220. It's one side of 110 and the other side of 110, which creates 220 for the bottom connector. Because those two do not connect. So I can lose one side and still have the other, I think. But when I checked it, both sides were working fine, so I'm not too worried about it. So that's where I'm at on this. I'm going to test run it after a while, see how it does, see how long it'll run, see if it'll keep running for about an hour, and keep everything going. And then I will bring you back and let you know how it turned out. Well, the generator works. I ran it 30 minutes before it quit because it popped the little breaker in it. It shut it down because I had that battery charger hooked up. I had that shop vac hooked up. I had that shop vac hooked up. I had that electric motor hooked up. And I had that big squirrel cage fan hooked up. And everything was on high. And that was just a little more than what it could deal with at one time. So it popped a breaker. Once it cooled off, it reset itself and it's back to working fine. You just can't run that much stuff. That thing right there pulls quite a little bit of power. In fact, the cord even gets hot on it. So I know it's pulling quite a little bit of juice. But that made it work. So I have a backup for my backup generator. I have a backup for my backup for my backup. I've got 3 generators total. One's just a little bitty small one. That would be like if I had to have lights out here in the garage or something and the power was out, I could drag it out here. So that's it. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hold down here. I'm draining the fuel because I won't leave this thing sitting with fuel in them. I ran it till it ran out of fuel. I shut the petcock off in the tank, and then I ran her dry. And now I'm draining the tank into that can. And then I will park it till who knows when. So that's where this one ends. Tell a friend, tell a dozen. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Make the world a little bit better. God bless. It's a Sunday. Bye.